Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 23rd October 2023. My name is T.S.V. Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. Hardan, 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 Haribol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been discussing about the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been doing in all my previous videos. Hence, kindly subscribe to this vlog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my present, past, and future videos. So let us continue with the topic for discussion for today's video. Today we will discuss about the same topic that we have been trying to analyze through my previous videos. It is the analysis of two terms, namely intelligence and cunning, of a human living entity, whether male or female, in this particular society in the material world. By now, we have understood that when the head of a human living entity, whether male or female, controls the heart of the same human living entity, then that person is called intelligent. Whereas when the same person's heart starts controlling his head, then the same living entity, whether male or female, becomes cunning. This is the subtle difference between intelligence and cunning, according to the philosophers of yore who have been contemplating on this material universe for times immemorial. We have to allow our own discussion to revolve around this particular axis while understanding the psyche of any human living entity. Here we must remember that the head and the heart are both parts of the gross body of a human living entity. This gross body is the fourth of the layers that this material universe uses to envelop the spirit soul of any human living entity. The other three, namely causal intelligence, astral mind, and etheric senses, are subtle, but this fourth layer, called gross body, is made up of four natural elements known as air, water, fire, and earth. The three layers of subtle body are made up of the first element called ether. Now, when we are talking about the head ruling the heart or the heart ruling the head, then we must safely presume that this person's brain, which is a mass of tissue embedded in the cranium of that human living entity, is trying to use the vibrations of the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions, and the etheric body of senses, namely sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. The first layer, that is the causal body of intelligence, which constitutes only the 5% of psyche of any human living entity, is closer to his or her spirit soul. While discussing the material psyche of any human living entity, whether male or female, we have to only take into consideration the vibrations from the astral body of mind or the etheric body of senses. When we say that head is ruling the heart, then the vibrations from the astral body of mind is ruling the etheric body of senses and its vibrations. Whereas when it is the other way around, that is, when the heart begins to rule the head, then we can safely presume that in this particular living entity, at this juncture, his or her vibrations from his or her etheric body of senses is ruling the vibrations from the astral body of mind. We have to base our discussion on this. While trying to analyze this particular set of terms which are used to gauge the psyche of a human living entity, we have talked about several case histories which authenticate the reliability of this particular theory. It validates this theory. Today, we are going to talk about another very interesting and intriguing case history where we come to know how the same living entity who was set out in his own career as a very intelligent person allowed his own etheric senses and his own evil machinations to rule his head, and as a result of which he became suddenly cunning instead of intelligent. This spells the doom of this particular human living entity and how. We shall discuss about this in detail in this particular case history. There is one state called Kerala in the country called India. This Kerala is at the tip of the southern end of India. In this Kerala, in one particular township, lived a very intelligent, capable, enterprising, and prosperous cashew nut farmer, distributor, and businessman. The surname of this particular businessman was Pillai. Cashew nuts were their family business. This Mr. Pillai had three or four offsprings. Of them, the third was a gentleman called Mr. Rajan Pillai, who was born in April 1937. This person, this Mr. Rajan Pillai, proved to be extremely intelligent, erudite, educated, and capable. He graduated from some college in Kerala and was ready to join the family business. His own wise, astute father had lofty visions and ambitions. This guy wanted to spread his distribution all over the world, the distribution of cashew nuts. As a result of this, when this boy was ready to join the family business, he suggested to this boy that he should relocate to the country of Singapore in Southeast Asia to start their own distribution of cashew nuts network in Singapore. Singapore is an international business hub. Hence, distributions of products from anywhere in the country is facilitated by the communication, transportation, and other facilities provided by that particular country. Mr. Rajan Pillai, who was very intelligent and whose head ruled his heart, accepted his father's suggestion and promptly relocated to Singapore at the early age of 24. Soon after he landed in Singapore, he established his own distribution of cashew nuts set up in Singapore. This guy was very intelligent, capable, and had a very high business acumen. Soon he became popular and noted in the business community of Singapore as a successful distributor of cashew nuts through his own distribution center. So far, so good. However, the stars of Mr. Rajan Pillai were on the rising. More good was going to happen to him. This could make or mar Mr. Rajan Pillai. And how? We will know further when we view this particular case history on a lateral side when we ponder over the psyche of Mr. Rajan Pillai. While Mr. Rajan Pillai was quite engaged in his own business of distribution, one day he came across one white gentleman who belonged to the country of Canada. This particular white man was an extraordinarily successful and big businessman come industrialist. He had branches and offices not only in Canada but also all over the world. This guy was so capable, ambitious, and intelligent that he dabbled in various distribution, industry, and business propositions all at the same time, and that through to all around the world. This kept this white man quite busy. When this man saw the 24 or 25-year-old Mr. Rajan Pillai, he got very impressed by the dynamism, ambition, hard work, intelligence, experience, and maturity of Mr. Rajan Pillai. He wanted to use this boy for his own business. Hence, this Mr. Businessman from Canada, the white man, made one proposition to Mr. Rajan Pillai. He asked him to manage his own Singapore operations in Singapore along with his own distribution business so that they become partners in the white man's business and share the profit from their 50-50 or 40-60. That is either 50% to Mr. Rajan Pillai and 50% to the white man, or 40% to Mr. Rajan Pillai and 60% to the white man. Being a very intelligent person with his head ruling his heart, Mr. Rajan Pillai immediately jumped at this proposition. He was very much interested in managing such an international operation. And manage he did, that too very, very well. The white man told him that he was an extremely busy person and so he will not be able to concentrate on his own Singapore operation and that Mr. Rajan Pillai had to be all in the management of the Singapore operations of that white Canadian businessman. Mr. Rajan Pillai agreed to this proposal. Soon he began managing that business along with his own distribution business. He did it so well that soon Mr. Rajan Pillai came out in leaps and bounds and within a decade or so became a very internationally renowned, revered, and respected businessman. So much so that whenever he happened to come to India, this guy was treated like royalty in various five-star hotels in various towns and cities of India. This man had a carpet welcome whenever he visited India. People hung to every word that Mr. Rajan Pillai spoke, and they felt that this guy was a pillar of success and that too international. So far, so good. 20 or so years passed. Mr. Rajan Pillai had begun managing this foreign businessman's Singapore operations in the year 1963 or 1964. 20 years later, it was 1984. In 1984 or so, one day he came across one very famous, very powerful, and very affluent Indian businessman called Nasli Wadia. This Mr. Nasli Wadia had a twin citizenship. One was in India and the other was in England. Mr. Nasli Wadia was not only capable but he was highly connected both nationally and internationally and was a very astute and intelligent businessman himself. He was also an industrialist who owned a very popular business house called Bombay Dye. Mr. Rajan Pillai impressed Mr. Nasli Wadia no end. He felt that Mr. Rajan Pillai was a true friend and ally. So, Mr. Nasli Wadia humored Mr. Rajan Pillai and began inviting Mr. Rajan Pillai to his own family and social gatherings and parties. During this time, Mr. Rajan Pillai was also managing the business of the white businessman who told him to acquire some shares in various companies, including Britannia, the biscuit manufacturing company. This Britannia had its offices and factories both in India as well as England. The Indian industries of Britannia were situated in Chennai, that time Madras, in Tamil Nadu in India. Mr. The Canadian businessman was very much interested in investing in this company, just as an investor. Mr. Nasli Wadia wanted to take over the same company's Indian setup. That means that he wanted to acquire complete control of Britannia's operations in India. Mr. Rajan Pillai was a regular face in the social gatherings of Mr. Nasli Wadia. Both were quite close. Mr. Nasli Wadia one day, probably in his expansive talk, dropped his guard and spilled the beans that he wanted to take over Britannia. Everyone who listened to this was very much interested and encouraging. That included Mr. Rajan Pillai. Mr. Rajan Pillai and the others managed to find out what was the rate that Mr. Nasli Wadia had bid per share to acquire that Britannia industry. They came to know about the rate. They found that if Mr. Nasli Wadia managed to take over this Britannia industry in India, it would be at the rate per share of that particular Indian setup. Mr. Nasli Wadia jubilantly said that everything was almost over between the negotiations between Mr. Nasli Wadia and the management of Britannia in England, and that the agreement to take over was about to be signed. This was left at that. But then, 6 months later, Mr. Nasli Wadia found that there had been no development from the British side regarding the agreement between Mr. Nasli Wadia and the British conglomerate for Mr. Nasli Wadia to take over Britannia Industries. One day he casually inquired what was happening there. The news that he got then simply was like a heavyweight boxer's punch on his jaw. Mr. Nasli Wadia was quietly told that there had come another bidder for the same company who was offering a price per share which was higher than what Mr. Nasli Wadia was offering. Mr. Nasli Wadia was not just a businessman, he was an international business magnate and tycoon. He was extraordinarily affluent and wealthy and rich. That is precisely the reason why Mr. Nasli Wadia was quite confident that what price he was offering was a cut high above what the other businessmen could offer for the same industry. He got visibly upset and intrigued as to the identity of the businessman who was offering a higher price per share for that particular industry. When he contacted his own grapevine in the Britannia industry, he came to know the identity of that particular businessman or bidder for that industry. He was none other than Mr. Rajan Pillai. Here we take a detour. Mr. Rajan Pillai began his career as a very intelligent distributor of cashew nuts in Singapore. He had his own head firmly placed in between his wide shoulders, and that head ruled his heart. In other words, the vibrations from the astral body of mind of Mr. Rajan Pillai were far above in consideration by his own brain to the vibrations from his etheric senses. But as they say, it is just a step from the sublime to the ridiculous. This world is full of cases where very capable and intelligent people have made Himalayan blunders. Somewhere down the line, after tasting success for some 20 odd years, Mr. Rajan Pillai, for a change, probably thought that he could allow his own heart which was the center of his vibrations from his etheric body of senses, to rule his own head, which was the center of vibrations from the astral body of mind. A person who had started as extremely intelligent suddenly started showing shades of cunning in his own dealings. Probably this was because of the five evils, according to Lord Krishna, that plague every human living entity in this world. This has been quoted by Lord Krishna in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. They are lust, greed, anger, illusion, and false ego. Kama, lust; krodha, anger; lobha, greed; moha, illusion; and ahankara, false ego. Probably for some reason, suddenly Mr. Rajan Pillai had become greedy and had delusions of grandeur. He probably began thinking like a megalomaniac. It was because of this, along with his own false ego, that made him bid for a higher price per share for the same Britannia industry in Madras. Mr. Nasli Wadia was very upset and angry. He could not tolerate this one bit. This guy had been a very good friend till yesterday, but now he was trying to act too smart and was getting too big for his boots. Even then, Mr. Nasri Wadia was cautious. He really thought that Mr. Rajan Pillai was acting as a front for the Canadian businessman. Mr. Nasli Wadia knew that Canadian businessman. He asked him why this man was using Rajan Pillai as a front to acquire the Britannia Industries. This man was stunned to hear this. He told Mr. Nasli Walia that he did not even have an idea that Mr. Rajan Pillai was trying to acquire the Britannia Industries in India. This intrigued Mr. Nasli Walia to the quick. He warned that Canadian businessman that he felt something fishy about the nature, demeanor, and operations of Mr. Rajan Pillai. The Canadian man tried to inquire about this. For that, he used his own firm of expert auditors to audit and investigate the business of the same Canadian businessman which Mr. Rajan Pillai had been managing in Singapore for the past 20 or so years. This team of expert chartered accountants came with an explanation that Mr. Rajan Pillai had been taking that Canadian businessman for a ride all these 2 or so decades. He did something which was quite simple. For instance, if the company made a profit of, say, 100%. Mr. Rajan Pillai was supposed to get 50% and that particular businessman from Canada another 50%. What Mr. Rajan Pillai did was to cook up the account books of that company in such a way that of this 100%, only 50% was declared as the actual profit in the books of that company. The other 50 was secretly siphoned off by Mr. Rajan Pillai for his own personal use. The other 50, which had now become the new profit of that company, was shared equally between Mr. Rajan Pillai and that Canadian businessman. Thus, every year, Mr. Rajan Pillai ended up with 75% of profit and the Canadian businessman got only 25% of the profit. When the Canadian businessman got wind of this, he immediately sued Mr. Rajan Pillai in a Singapore court. Mr. Rajan Pillai was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years imprisonment in the Singapore prison at that time. The smart Mr. Rajan Pillai went to the same Canadian and apologized for his demeanor, for his indiscipline or wrong transactions and his evil deeds as far as that particular business was concerned. The Canadian got pity on Mr. Rajan Pillai, who he considered as a sort of his own son, and he arranged for Mr. Rajan Pillai to leave Singapore for good and go to any other place in the world and escape imprisonment. Mr. Rajan Pillai chose to come to India. He tried to fight extradition to Singapore to avoid that 20-year prison sentence. When Mr. Nasli Wadia got wind of this, he got very angry. He found that this Canadian businessman was not interested in suitably chastising Mr. Rajan Pillai. He informed the government of India, that is, Mr. Nasri Wadia informed the government of India about the dis, the wrong deeds of Mr. Rajan Pillai and his problems with the Singapore government. The government of India intervened and had Mr. Rajan Pillai brought to Delhi, where he was promptly arrested and imprisoned. While the government was trying to transact with the Singapore government to avoid the extradition of Mr. Rajan Pillai, this man, who was a very heavy drunkard, got ill because of cirrhosis of liver and a few days later died in the same Indian Delhi prison. Unfortunately, that was a very sad end for a very promising young man who started as a very intelligent businessman but ended up so badly in some prison. This was certainly no way to go for anyone, including such a lofty and well respected and revered, internationally well known businessman like Mr. Rajan Pillai. We must take a leaf out of the case history of Mr. Rajan Pillai, and we must always try to avoid allowing our own lust, greed, illusion, ego, and heart to rule our own material logic, mind, feelings, and emotions. This is the only way to positively lead a positive and successful life in this material world. Once we reach saturation point in material success, we may go spiritual and start meditating to get self-realized as our true identity as a spirit soul and not as a living entity. Once this happens, we may again try to get permanently liberated from this repeated cycle of endless births and deaths in this material world, and then finally get delivered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as fully evolved, mature, experienced spirit souls. That must be the aim of every human living entity, whether male or female, who has come into this world to learn about life, both material as well as spiritual. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this particular case history. Please give me your own expert views, opinions, thoughts, and ideas so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.